We saved 2 years for our anniversary trip. The night before our flight, Mom called. "Your sister needs you to watch the kids." I said no. Dad texted, "Family comes first." I turned off my phone and boarded the plane. When we landed, I had 43 missed calls. My name's Oliver. I'm 34, and I want to tell you about the time I boarded a plane with 43 missed calls waiting for me on the other side. But before I get to that beautiful disaster, I need to give you some context, because without it, you'll think I'm just some guy who ignored his family for a vacation. And honestly, I wish it were that simple. I've been married to my wife Juniper for 7 years. If you're wondering, yes, that's her real name. And yes, she's heard every single Barry joke you're about to think of. Junie is the kind of person who remembers everyone's birthday, writes thank you cards by hand, and once drove 45 minutes in a rainstorm to bring soup to a coworker she'd known for 2 weeks. She's a better human than I deserve, and I'm not just saying that to score points. I genuinely believe it. Now here's the thing about my family. I grew up in a house where everything revolved around my older sister, Darla. And look, I love Darla. She's my sister. But from the time I was old enough to understand what was happening, it was pretty clear that the family orbit had one son, and it wasn't me. Darla was the first grandchild, the first to graduate college, the first to get married, the first to have kids. Every milestone she hit was treated like a national holiday. When I graduated with honors from my engineering program, my dad said, and I quote, "That's great, bud. Hey, did your mom tell you Darla's thinking about remodeling her kitchen?" I sat there in my cap and gown feeling like a background extra in someone else's movie. Darla married a guy named Rowan when she was 25. Rowan is one of those guys who always has a great business idea that never quite works out. He's been a day trader, a crypto consultant, a life coach, and most recently he started some kind of artisanal beef jerky company that lasted about 4 months before the health department had some opinions. Through all of this, Darla stayed home with their 3 kids, Cody, Maisie, and Little Roe Jr., who everybody calls Bug for reasons nobody can remember. They're good kids, chaotic, loud, and capable of destroying a living room in under 6 minutes, but good kids. The problem is that my parents, Hank and Lorraine, have spent the last decade acting like Darla's chaos is everyone else's responsibility. When Rowan's jerky empire collapsed, guess who loaned them rent money? Oliver. When Darla needed emergency dental work and their insurance lapsed because Rowan forgot to pay the premium, guess who covered it? Oliver. When they needed someone to watch the kids every other weekend so Darla could decompress, guess who rearranged his entire schedule? If you guessed Oliver, congratulations, you're seeing the pattern. And through all of this, did anyone ever say thank you? Did anyone ever acknowledge that maybe Junie and I had our own lives, our own plans, our own stuff going on? Not really. In my family, helping Darla wasn't a favor. It was an expectation. It was the baseline. You didn't get credit for it any more than you'd get credit for breathing. About 2.5 years ago, Junie and I were lying in bed and she turned to me and said, "I want to go to Greece." She'd wanted to go since she was a kid, ever since her grandmother showed her postcards from Santorini and told her stories about whitewashed buildings against water so blue it didn't look real. Her grandmother passed away before they ever got to go together, and it had been sitting in Junie's heart like an open tab ever since. So we made a plan. We opened a separate savings account, set up automatic transfers, cut back on eating out, and for 2 years we watched that number climb. $23,000. Flights, hotels, tours, spending money, all of it. We wanted to do it right. Our 7th anniversary was the target date, and we'd been counting down for months. Junie and I had never taken a real vacation together. Our honeymoon was a long weekend at a bed and breakfast 3 hours from home because I'd just started a new job. Every year since, something came up. Darla needed help. My parents had a thing. Money got tight because I'd loaned some to my sister again. Every single year, our plans got bumped for someone else's emergency. Not this time. This time we had the money saved, the flights booked, the hotels confirmed, and 2 weeks of paid time off approved. Junie had bought a new sundress and a travel journal. I downloaded 3 different apps to plan our itinerary. We were leaving on a Saturday morning, and by Saturday night, we'd be watching the sunset from a terrace in Athens. The Thursday before our flight, I made the mistake of mentioning the trip at my parents' house during a family dinner. I'd been vague about it on purpose, just saying we were going on a trip, no details. But my mom pressed, and I told them, "Greece." 2 weeks. Saturday morning flight. My mom's face did this thing where her smile stayed in place, but her eyes went completely flat, like someone had flipped a switch behind them. She said, "Oh, that's a long trip." My dad didn't even look up from his plate. Darla asked how much it cost, and when I didn't answer, she said, "Must be nice to have that kind of money just sitting around." Rowan laughed. Junie squeezed my hand under the table. We left dinner early. Junie didn't say anything in the car for the first 10 minutes, and then she said, "They're going to try something. You know that, right?" I told her she was being paranoid. She gave me a look that said she loved me, but also thought I was being incredibly naive. She's always right. I should really start leading with that. Friday night, the night before our 6 a.m. flight. Our bags were packed, lined up by the front door like little soldiers. Junie had laid out our travel outfits. I triple-checked the passports. We were in bed by 9:30 because we had to be at the airport by 4 in the morning. Everything was perfect. My phone rang at 10:15. It was my mom. I almost didn't answer. Something in my gut told me not to. But decades of conditioning are hard to override, so I picked up. "Oliver, honey, I need you to listen to me," she said, and her voice had that tone. That specific tone she uses when she's about to frame a demand as a desperate plea. "Darla needs you." Here's the story she gave me. Rowan had apparently landed some kind of last-minute consulting gig 3 states away. He was leaving Saturday morning and wouldn't be back until the following Friday. Darla had a commitment she couldn't get out of, something about a wellness retreat she'd already paid for that was non-refundable. So the kids needed someone to watch them for the entire week. "Mom," I said, sitting up in bed. Junie was already awake, watching me with an expression that can only be described as "I told you so" in human form. "We're leaving for Greece in the morning. You know this." "I know, honey, but this is family. Darla is really counting on you. She's been under so much stress lately, and she really needs this retreat for her mental health. You understand that, right?" I took a breath. A long one. The kind of breath you take when you're choosing between saying what you want to say and saying what will keep the peace. For most of my life, I'd chosen peace. Every single time. "Mom, I can't. We've been planning this for 2 years. The flights are booked. The hotels are paid for. I'm not canceling." The silence on the other end lasted about 4 seconds, but it felt like a full minute. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. That pleading tone was gone, replaced by something colder. Something that sounded like disappointment sharpened into a weapon. "I just think it's interesting," she said, "that you can spend thousands of dollars on a vacation, but you can't help your sister when she needs you. Your father and I didn't raise you to be selfish, Oliver." I told her I was sorry she felt that way, but my answer was no. She hung up without saying goodbye. 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from my dad. Just 5 words. "Family comes first, Oliver." Junie read the text over my shoulder and said, "What do you want to do?" I loved her for asking it that way. Not telling me, not pressuring me, just giving me the space to decide. I thought about every canceled plan, every borrowed dollar never repaid, every moment I'd put my own life on hold because someone decided their needs were more urgent than mine. And I thought about Junie, who had waited her whole life to see Santorini, who had saved every spare dollar for 2 years. I turned off my phone. I set my alarm for 3:30, and I went to sleep. We boarded that plane at 6:02 on Saturday morning. When we landed in Athens 11 hours later, and I turned my phone back on, it nearly vibrated off the tray table. 43 missed calls, 27 text messages, and 1 voicemail from my mother that started with the words, "I hope you're happy." Yeah, I was about to be. I should tell you about those 43 missed calls, because they paint a picture more vivid than anything I could describe. I didn't listen to them all in Athens. I listened to the first 3 while Junie was in the bathroom at the airport, and that was enough to give me the general flavor. Call 1 was from my mom, left at 6:45 a.m., right around the time our plane was pulling away from the gate. She sounded more annoyed than panicked. "Oliver, this is your mother. I don't know what you think you're doing, but Darla is beside herself. Call me back immediately." Classic Lorraine. Not asking, telling. Call 2 was from Darla herself, left around 8 a.m. Her voice had that particular wobble she does when she's trying to sound like she's been crying, but hasn't actually committed to real tears yet. "Ollie, I can't believe you just left. I really needed you this weekend. Rowan's gone and the kids are already being impossible, and Mom says you just turned off your phone? How could you do this to me?" Note the framing. Not how could you prioritize your wife and your anniversary and the trip you've been saving for. No, how could you do this to me? Because in Darla's world, every decision anyone makes is either for her or against her. Call 3 was from my dad. This one was shorter. Your mother is very upset. Your sister is very upset. I don't know what's gotten into you, but this isn't how we raised you. Call us. That was it. No mention of my trip. No acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, I had a valid reason for not being available. In my dad's mind, the equation was simple. Darla needed something. Oliver didn't provide it. Therefore, Oliver was wrong. End of calculation. I turned my phone off again after that third voicemail and didn't turn it back on for 2 days. And you know what? Those 2 days in Athens were incredible. We walked through the Plaka district with no plan and no schedule, just wandering through narrow streets lined with bougainvillea and stopping at whatever caught our eye. We ate at a tiny restaurant where the owner seated us on his rooftop and brought out dish after dish that we didn't order, just waving his hand and saying, "You try, you try." Junie tried octopus for the first time and made a face that I will treasure for the rest of my life. We stood at the Acropolis at golden hour, and she grabbed my arm and didn't say anything for a full 5 minutes. Just stood there looking out over the city with tears running down her face. Not sad tears. The kind you get when something you've imagined your whole life turns out to be even better than you pictured. That's when I knew, with absolute certainty, that I'd made the right choice. On Monday morning, I finally turned my phone back on and started reading the texts. The first few were variations of the voicemails. Disappointment, guilt trips, demands to call back. But then they started escalating. My mom had texted at least a dozen times. The progression went from "call me" to "this is unacceptable" to "I've never been so disappointed in you" to "and this is the one that really got me. Your grandmother would be ashamed of you." My grandmother, who had been dead for 6 years, was being weaponized from the grave. That's a new level of guilt tripping, even for my mother. Darla's texts were more dramatic. She sent me a picture of Bug crying with the caption, "This is what you're missing." She sent another one that said, "Rowan's mom can't help either, so I guess I just have to cancel everything because nobody cares about me." Then she sent a long paragraph about how I'd always been jealous of her, and this was my way of punishing her for being the favorite. I read that one twice because I genuinely couldn't tell if she was being serious or if she'd accidentally sent me something she meant to put in a group chat. My dad sent exactly one more text after the first one. It said, "Don't bother coming to Thanksgiving." That was in early October, by the way. The man was preemptively disinviting me from a holiday that was 7 weeks away. Bold strategy. But here's the thing that really twisted the knife. While I was scrolling through the messages, I noticed something. Not a single person had asked where we were. Not one text said, "Are you guys okay?" Or "Did you make it safely?" Or "How's the trip?" It was all about what I wasn't doing for them. Nobody cared where I was. They only cared where I wasn't. I showed Junie the texts over breakfast at our hotel. She read through them slowly, sipping her coffee, her expression shifting from irritation to something sadder. When she finished, she set the phone down and said, "Oliver, I want to tell you something, and I want you to really hear it." I nodded. She took my hand across the table and said, "They don't miss you. They miss what you do for them. There's a difference, and it's the difference that matters." I sat with that for a long time. I sat with it while we ferried to Mykonos, while we walked along the waterfront in Little Venice, while we watched the pelicans waddle around like they owned the place. I kept turning it over in my mind like a stone in my pocket. They don't miss you. They miss what you do for them. The thing is, part of me had always known it. I'd known it when my parents forgot my 30th birthday because they were busy planning Darla's baby shower for Bug. I'd known it when Darla called me 2 hours after my wedding to ask if I could lend her money for Cody's school fees. I'd known it when my dad told me he was too busy to come see me get promoted to lead engineer at my firm, but drove 4 hours to watch Darla's son play t-ball. I'd known it my entire life. I'd just never let myself say it out loud. On our 4th night in Greece, Junie and I were sitting on a balcony in Santorini, the one she'd been dreaming about since she was 7 years old. The sun was going down and the whole sky looked like it was on fire, all orange and pink and gold bleeding into the bluest water I'd ever seen. She leaned against me and said, "Thank you for choosing us." And something shifted inside me. Something that had been bending for years finally broke, but it broke in the good way. The way a bone heals stronger after it's been set right. I decided right there, watching the sun disappear into the Aegean Sea, that things were going to change. I was done being the family ATM. I was done being the emergency babysitter, the emotional support brother, the guy who drops everything because someone else didn't plan their life properly. I wasn't going to be cruel about it. I wasn't going to burn bridges or send some dramatic manifesto. I was just going to stop volunteering to carry weight that was never mine to carry. We spent the rest of the trip exactly the way we'd planned. Delos, Naxos, back to Athens for the final 2 days. Junie filled her travel journal cover to cover. I ate more lamb than any one person should consume in a 2-week span. We laughed more than we had in years. We held hands like we were 22 again. For 14 days, nobody asked me for money. Nobody needed me to fix their problems, and nobody made me feel guilty for existing on my own terms. When we got home, tanned and rested, and carrying about 40 pounds of olive oil and souvenirs between us, I sent one text to my family group chat. It said, "We're home safe. Trip was wonderful. Hope everyone is doing well." Short, polite, neutral. My mom responded 3 hours later with, "Glad you had fun. Darla had to cancel her retreat. She's very upset. No welcome home. No glad you're safe." Just one more reminder that my happiness had cost Darla something. I didn't respond. And honestly, that silence felt like the most powerful thing I'd done in 34 years. The first month after we got back from Greece was like living in a Cold War. Nobody called me. I didn't call them. For the first time since I could remember, my phone wasn't buzzing with requests from my family, and the silence was equal parts peaceful and unsettling. Like when you live next to train tracks your whole life, and then one day the trains stop running. You should be relieved, but your brain keeps waiting for the rumble. Junie noticed the change in me right away. Not the family silence. She was thrilled about that. She noticed that I was lighter. I was sleeping better. I wasn't checking my phone every 20 minutes with that low-grade dread I used to carry around like a second wallet. She said it was like watching someone take off a backpack they'd forgotten they were wearing. At work, things started shifting too. I'd been a lead engineer at Whitmore and Associates for about 3 years at that point, and I was good at my job, but I'd always held back a little. Not on purpose, exactly. It's more that when you spend your whole life being told your accomplishments don't matter, you start believing it. You don't chase the big promotions. You don't speak up in meetings. You do solid work and hope someone notices, and when they don't, you tell yourself that's fine because at least you're being helpful. But after Greece, something clicked. My buddy at work, this guy named Sullivan who'd been in the industry for about 20 years, took me aside one afternoon and said, "Ollie, you've got more talent in your left pinky than half the guys in the executive boardroom. When are you going to stop acting like you're grateful to be here and start acting like they're lucky to have you?" Sullivan's the kind of guy who says things like that with zero irony, just staring at you like he's daring you to disagree. I didn't disagree. I started putting together a proposal for a project I'd been sitting on for over a year. A sustainable infrastructure design for a mixed-use development in the city. It was ambitious, way outside the scope of what our firm usually took on, and part of the reason I'd never brought it forward was because I could hear my dad's voice in the back of my head saying, "Don't get ahead of yourself, bud." But I was done listening to that voice. I worked on the proposal for 3 weeks. Late nights, early mornings, weekends at the dining table with blueprints spread out while Junie brought me coffee and occasionally reminded me that humans need food. When I finally presented it to the partners at Whitmore, there was a silence in the room that lasted about 10 seconds. I thought I'd crashed and burned. Then our senior partner, a woman named Cordelia who'd been in architecture and engineering for 30 years, looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "Why didn't you bring this to us sooner?" They greenlit the project. Not only that, they put me in charge of it. Full lead. My own team. It was the single biggest professional opportunity of my career, and it happened because for the first time in my life, I wasn't using all my energy propping up people who didn't appreciate it. Meanwhile, the family Cold War continued. I got bits and pieces from my cousin Emmett, who was the closest thing I had to an ally in the family. Emmett was my Uncle Gus's son, and he'd always been the other black sheep, the one who went to art school instead of business school and never heard the end of it. He kept me updated through texts that read like dispatches from behind enemy lines. According to Emmett, my parents were telling extended family that I'd abandoned Darla in her time of need to go on a lavish European vacation. The word lavish was doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. They made it sound like I'd chartered a yacht while my sister sat alone in a dark room. The reality was that Darla had ended up asking Rowan's mother, a perfectly capable woman named Cordell who lived 20 minutes away to watch the kids. The very same Cordell who Darla's earlier text had claimed can't help. Funny how solutions appear when the designated doormat isn't available. Emmett also told me something that stuck with me. He said that at a family dinner I wasn't invited to, my mom had said, Oliver's always been difficult. Even as a child, he always wanted things to be about him. Emmett said he'd almost choked on his pot roast. The kid who never had a birthday party that wasn't also Darla's celebration. The kid who wore hand-me-downs while his sister got new clothes. The kid who was told to be quiet every time he tried to share good news about himself. That kid was the one who wanted things to be about him. The lack of self-awareness would have been impressive if it weren't so painful. Around November, I got a text from Darla. The first direct communication in about 6 weeks. It said, Mom and Dad's anniversary dinner is December 8th. You should be there. Not an invitation. An instruction. No mention of the Greece situation. No acknowledgement that anything had happened between us. Just an expectation that I'd show up and play my role like nothing had changed. I almost texted back something sarcastic. I almost typed, Sorry, I'll be busy being selfish that day. But Junie talked me down. She said, Don't give them ammunition. Be the bigger person. Just be honest. So I texted back, Thanks for letting me know. I'll think about it. Which in my family was basically the equivalent of a declaration of war, because the expected response was, Of course I'll be there. What can I bring? And should I also rearrange my entire life for dessert? Here's what I'll say about that period. The months between October and December were some of the hardest and best months of my life. Hard because I was grieving. Not a death, but the loss of a fantasy. The fantasy that my family would one day see me, really see me, as someone whose needs and feelings and dreams mattered as much as Darla's. I was letting go of that hope, and letting go of hope is its own kind of mourning. But it was also the best because I was building something real. The project at work was thriving. My team was incredible, a group of sharp, hungry engineers and designers who worked together like a well-oiled machine. Junie and I started planning things just for us, concert tickets, weekend hikes, cooking classes where we made pasta so badly that the instructor looked like she was going to cry. We were investing in our marriage, in our happiness, in a life that wasn't defined by who needed what from us. By December, I was in the best shape of my life, professionally, emotionally, and personally. I felt like I'd finally figured out who Oliver was when he wasn't busy being everyone else's safety net. And that's exactly when my family decided they needed me again. The call came on December 3rd, 5 days before my parents' anniversary dinner. It wasn't from my mom or Darla this time. It was from my dad, which immediately told me something was wrong, because Hank doesn't call. Hank texts 5-word sentences and considers that peak communication. For him to actually dial my number meant the situation had moved beyond what a text could handle. Oliver, he said when I picked up. No bud, no son, just Oliver, flat and serious. We need to talk. Okay, I said. I was at my desk at work, looking at the skyline through my office window. The new office, by the way. The project had earned me a corner office with actual walls instead of a cubicle partition. What's going on, Dad? Your mother and I are having some financial trouble. I need you to hear me out before you say anything. So I heard him out. And honestly, what he told me was worse than anything I'd expected. It turned out that Rowan's latest business venture, some kind of online supplement company, hadn't just failed. It had failed spectacularly. He'd taken out a personal loan against the house he and Darla were renting from my parents. That's right, my parents owned the house Darla lived in. They bought it years ago as an investment property and rented it to Darla and Rowan at well below market rate, which I'd never been told about. So not only had my parents been subsidizing Darla's lifestyle for years in ways I didn't even know about, but now Rowan had managed to drag a property my parents owned into his financial disaster. The lender was threatening to put a lien on the property. My parents' credit was at risk. They needed $25,000 to settle the debt and prevent things from getting worse. My dad said all of this in the same tone he'd used to describe a weather forecast. Flat, factual, like he was reading a report about someone else's life. Then came the part I'd been waiting for. We need your help, Oliver. You're the only one in a position to handle this. I let the silence sit for a beat. Then I said, What about Darla? What about her? Has she contributed anything? Has Rowan? My dad made a sound that was halfway between a sigh and a scoff. Rowan doesn't have anything to contribute. You know that. And Darla's doing her best with the kids. Dad, I've been doing my best too. For years. And every time I did my best for this family, it wasn't enough and it wasn't acknowledged. You texted me that I shouldn't bother coming to Thanksgiving because I took my wife on a trip we saved 2 years for. Another silence. Then, that was your mother's idea. And you sent it. I told my dad I needed time to think. He said, don't take too long. Which was about as close to please as Hank gets. I hung up and sat in my new office and looked at the city and thought about $25,000. That night, I told Junie everything. She listened the way she always does, with her full attention, no interrupting, just absorbing. When I finished, she was quiet for a while, and then she said, what do you want to do? And I mean you, Oliver. Not the version of you that feels obligated. The real you. I don't want to just hand them money, I said. Not this time. Not after everything. Then don't. But it's my parents. If they lose that property, their retirement is affected. They'll be in real trouble. Junie nodded. That's real. But here's the thing. If you bail them out with no conditions, nothing changes. You become the ATM again. Darla and Rowan face 0 consequences. And next year, it'll be something else. She was right. She's always right. I really should tattoo that somewhere. Over the next 2 days, I did something I'd never done before. I consulted a financial advisor, a guy named Harlan who Sullivan had recommended. Harlan was a straight shooter with a handshake like a bear trap and a talent for making complicated things simple. I laid out the whole situation, family dynamics included, and asked him what he thought. Harlan leaned back in his chair and said, Oliver, you've got the means to help, and that's a good position to be in. But you've also got leverage, and that's a better position. If you're going to put $25,000 on the table, you need to make sure it's a transaction, not a donation. Set terms. Protect yourself. And make sure everyone in that family understands that the Bank of Oliver is closing permanently after this. So that's what I did. I spent the next 2 days putting together what Junie jokingly called the Oliver Accords. It was a formal agreement, drafted with the help of a lawyer friend of Harlan's named Sloan, that outlined exactly what would happen if I agreed to help. The terms were simple. I would provide the $25,000 as a loan, not a gift. It would be repaid in full within 5 years at a modest interest rate. The repayment would be the responsibility of Darla and Rowan, since it was their mess, not my parents'. There would be a signed promissory note. And here was the big one. My parents would formally transfer ownership of the rental property into their own names only, removing any possibility of Rowan using it as collateral again. Additionally, Rowan would be required to complete a financial literacy course before any funds were disbursed. I also added a personal clause that Sloan said wasn't legally binding, but that I wanted in writing anyway. It stated that I was doing this of my own free will, and that this was the final financial assistance I would provide to any family member. Period. Full stop. The well was dry after this. I printed out 2 copies of the agreement. I put them in a folder. And then I called my dad and told him I'd be at the anniversary dinner on December 8th. Good, he said. Your mother will be pleased. I'm not coming for dinner, Dad. I'm coming to have a conversation. And I'm bringing paperwork. The silence on the other end told me he had no idea what to do with that information. Welcome to the club, Hank. I'd been living in that confusion my whole life. The night before the dinner, Junie helped me pick out my clothes. Not because I needed fashion advice, but because she said I should walk in there looking like the man I'd become, not the kid they remembered. She picked a navy suit I'd bought for a work presentation, no tie, top button undone. She straightened my collar and looked at me and said, "Give them hell." Politely. I drove to my parents' house on December 8th with a folder on the passenger seat and a calm in my chest that I hadn't expected. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was just ready. I pulled into my parents' driveway at 6:15 and sat in the car for a minute. Not because I was scared, but because I wanted to remember this feeling. This clarity. For 34 years I'd walked into that house, trying to be small enough to fit the space they'd made for me. Tonight, I was walking in at full height. The house smelled like Lorraine's pot roast, the one she makes for every important occasion. Darla was already there, sitting at the dining room table with Rowan, who was on his phone and looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. My parents were in the kitchen. When I walked in, my mom turned around and gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oliver, you came." Like she was surprised I'd shown up to a dinner I said I'd attend. Like I was the unreliable one. "Hi, Mom. Happy anniversary." I hugged her. It felt stiff. My dad shook my hand. Darla gave me a wave from the table. Rowan didn't look up from his phone. Classic. We sat down to eat, and for about 20 minutes, it was almost normal. My mom talked about her garden club. My dad mentioned something about the gutters needing work. Darla complained about Cody's teacher. Nobody mentioned Greece. Nobody mentioned the 43 missed calls. Nobody mentioned the fact that we hadn't spoken properly in 2 months. We just pretended, the way my family has always pretended, that if you don't talk about something, it didn't happen. I let it go on until dessert. My mom brought out a pie, and while she was cutting it, I set the folder on the table. "What's that?" Darla asked, eyeing it like I'd placed a live animal on the tablecloth. "That's what I came to talk about." I looked at my dad. "You called me about the money situation. I've given it a lot of thought, and I've come up with a solution." The room went quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear the kitchen clock ticking. My mom set down the pie server. My dad crossed his arms. Rowan finally put down his phone. I opened the folder and laid out the agreement. I explained each term calmly and clearly, the way I present a project proposal at work. The loan, the repayment schedule, the promissory note, the property transfer, the financial literacy course for Rowan. The clause about this being the last time. When I finished, nobody spoke for what felt like an eternity, but was probably about 15 seconds. Darla broke the silence first. "You're joking, right? You want us to sign a contract? I'm your sister, Oliver, not a business deal." "You're right, you're my sister," I said. "And I love you. But I've given this family thousands of dollars over the years, and not once has anyone acknowledged it, thanked me for it, or paid me back. I'm not doing that again. If I'm going to help, there are going to be terms." "This is ridiculous," Darla said, looking at my parents for backup. "Mom, tell him this is ridiculous." My mom's mouth opened, but my dad spoke first. "Let me see it." He pulled the document toward him and started reading. My mom leaned over his shoulder. The room was so quiet I could hear Rowan breathing. After a minute, my dad looked up. "You want Darla and Rowan to repay you, not us." "That's correct. It's their debt. Rowan took out the loan. It should be their responsibility." "I can't afford that," Rowan said, speaking for the first time all night. "I'm between opportunities right now." "You've been between opportunities for 7 years, Rowan," I said, and I wasn't being mean about it. I said it the way you'd state a fact. The sky is blue. Water is wet. Rowan is between opportunities. That's why there's a financial literacy course in the agreement. And that's why the repayment period is 5 years. I'm not asking for the money tomorrow. I'm asking for accountability. Darla stood up. "I can't believe this. After everything Mom and Dad have done for you, this is how you treat family? You go on your fancy vacation, you disappear for months, and now you show up with a contract." And that's when something happened that I did not expect. My mom spoke. "Sit down, Darla." We all looked at her. Darla looked like she'd been slapped. My mom's face was doing something I'd never seen before, something that looked almost like shame. "Your brother," my mom said, slowly, like she was choosing each word carefully, "is the only person in this family who has consistently shown up. He's the only one who's ever offered to help without being asked. And we have never, not once, treated him the way he deserved for it." She looked at me, and for the first time in my adult life, I saw my mother actually seeing me. "I owe you an apology, Oliver. A real one. Not for the phone call. For all of it." My dad cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable, which for Hank meant he was experiencing a human emotion and didn't know where to put it. "Your mother's right," he said. "We leaned on you too hard. That wasn't fair. I won't pretend I didn't feel something crack open in my chest when they said that. I won't pretend my eyes didn't get a little wet. But I held it together, because this wasn't the time for a breakdown. This was the time for a new beginning, and new beginnings require clear heads." Darla sat back down. She was crying. Real tears this time, not the performative kind. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "I mean, I knew you helped, but I didn't know it was like that. I didn't know you felt like that." "Because nobody asked," I said. Not with anger, just truth. Rowan, to his credit, looked at the agreement and said, "I'll sign it. And I'll do the course." Then he looked at me and said something he'd never said in all the years I'd known him. "Thank you, Oliver. And I'm sorry." They signed. Both copies. My dad signed as a witness. My mom watched the whole thing with her hand over her mouth, and when it was done, she walked over to me and hugged me. A real hug. The kind that lasts long enough for you to feel it in your bones. That was 4 months ago. Darla and I have talked more in the last 4 months than we did in the previous 4 years. It's not perfect. We're not suddenly best friends braiding each other's hair. But she called me on my birthday last month, the first time she'd remembered it without being reminded, and she said, "I know I have a lot of making up to do. I'm going to try." That was enough. For now, that was enough. Rowan is 3 weeks into his financial literacy course, and according to Darla, he's actually engaged with it. He got a job at a logistics company. Not glamorous, but steady, with benefits and a paycheck that shows up on time. My parents renegotiated the rental arrangement for the house, and Darla and Rowan are paying something closer to fair market value now, which Darla initially protested and then accepted when she realized this was what adult life actually looks like. My parents and I are in a different place than we were. Not worse, not entirely better, just different, more honest. My mom has started asking me about my work, actually asking and listening to the answers. My dad isn't great with words, but he showed up at my office last week with a bag of bagels and said, "Saw this place on the way over. Thought you might be hungry." For Hank, that's basically a sonnet. The project at work is ahead of schedule. My team is incredible. Sullivan took me out for a steak last week and said, "I told you they were lucky to have you." Now everybody knows it. Cordelia mentioned the word partner in a meeting last month, and while I don't want to jinx anything, let's just say I didn't hate the sound of it. And Junie, my wonderful, patient, brilliant Junie, who saw through my family's nonsense long before I did and loved me anyway. Last Tuesday, she came home from work and found me in the kitchen attempting to recreate a pasta dish we'd had in Athens. It was terrible, like genuinely bad. She ate the whole plate and told me it was the best meal she'd ever had. And when I called her a liar, she laughed and said, "Okay, it's awful, but you made it for me, and that's what matters." We're already planning our next trip, Portugal this time. And this time, when my phone rings the night before, I'm not going to hesitate. I'm going to smile, let it ring, and go to sleep next to the woman who taught me that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. So yeah, 43 missed calls, 27 texts, 1 voicemail that started with, "I hope you're happy." I am, Mom. I really am.